The dark side of Brazil, the land of violence they hide from the world. Colorful carnival, paradisiacal beaches, magical football, contagious music, and the image of a tropical country where the people's joy overcomes any adversity. When we think of Brazil, our minds are invaded by scenes from Rio de Janeiro, the warm smiles of Brazilians, the natural beauties of the Amazon, and the promise of a paradise where cultural diversity creates perfect harmony. The Brazilian tourism industry invested decades building this image, an exotic and welcoming country where different ethnicities coexist peacefully, where nature offers unique spectacles in the world, and where the genuine hospitality of the Brazilian people conquers any visitor. But there exists a Brazil that postcards don't show, that the Brazilian government carefully hides from international eyes, and that global media prefers to ignore to keep the tropical fantasy alive. A nation where 75,000 people are murdered annually, where women are killed simply for being women, where children are recruited by organized crime before learning to read. What city are you watching this video from? Tell me in the comments where you're speaking from, because after this investigation, you'll understand why the Brazil we know is just a carefully constructed facade to hide one of the most violent countries in the world. There exists a Brazil where being born black is almost a guarantee of a more difficult life, where being poor is a condemnation that passes from generation to generation, where police kill more than criminals, and where corruption corrodes institutions from the base to the top. A land where the Amazon is destroyed to enrich a few while indigenous peoples are exterminated, where public hospitals lack basic medicines, and where quality education is a privilege for those who can pay. Today, we're going to take you on a journey through the darkest side of the land of Pelé and Christ the Redeemer. We'll discover how organized crime became a parallel power that governs entire territories, how police violence terrorizes poor communities, how environmental destruction threatens the planet's future, and how social inequality created an unofficial apartheid that separates Brazilians into completely different worlds. Prepare to discover that behind the smile and music exists a country where human life is worth less than a rifle bullet. Number 1. The Daily Massacre. 75,000 deaths per year. Brazil is not officially at war, but has mortality numbers that would rival international armed conflicts. With approximately 75,000 homicides annually, the country kills more people in 1 year than many civil wars kill in decades, transforming Brazilian cities into some of the most dangerous places on the planet outside declared war zones. To put these numbers in perspective, Brazil has more annual homicides than the United States, Canada, Western Europe, and Australia combined. Every 7 minutes, a person is murdered in the country. Every hour, more than 8 Brazilian families receive the devastating news that they've lost a loved one to violence. Natal, in Rio Grande do Norte, registers 102 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants, a rate higher than Syrian cities during the Civil War. Fortaleza presents similar numbers, with more than 2,500 annual murders in a single city. Salvador leads the statistics among capitals, with rates that make the Bahian city more dangerous than Caracas or San Pedro Sula. Black youth is the main target of this silent genocide. Young black people between 15 and 29 years old are 2.5 times more likely to be murdered than young white people in the same age group. In some metropolitan regions, being young, black, and a periphery resident equals a statistical death sentence. 1 in every 100 young people with this profile will be murdered before age 25. What makes these numbers even more shocking is that the majority of murders are committed with legal firearms diverted from the official market. It's estimated that there are more than 17 million weapons in circulation in the country, 1 for every 12 inhabitants, with 8 million in the hands of organized crime through theft, police corruption, and illegal sales by licensed dealers. Number 2. Feminicide. 1 woman killed every 6 hours. Brazil wages an undeclared war against its own women. Every 6 hours, a Brazilian woman is murdered simply for being a woman, making the country 5th worldwide in feminicides and creating an environment where being born female represents constant risk of extreme violence. In 2023, more than 1,400 women were killed by feminicide, a number that represents only cases where gender motivation was officially recognized. Human rights organizations estimate the real number is at least 3 times higher, considering murders classified as simple homicides, but that were actually motivated by machismo, misogyny, or domestic violence. Roraima leads the statistics with 11.4 feminicides per 100,000 women, a rate that places the state among the most dangerous places in the world to be a woman. Acre and Mato Grosso do Sul complete the macabre ranking, with numbers that surpass recognizably violent countries like Honduras and El Salvador. Domestic violence is epidemic and institutionalized. Research reveals that 76% of Brazilian women have suffered some type of violence from intimate partners. Every 2 minutes, a woman is physically assaulted in the country. Every 8 minutes, a woman is raped. Numbers that represent only reported cases, since it's estimated that less than 10% of rapes are reported. Like this video, if you believe these brutal realities need to be exposed so the world knows what really happens in Brazil. The murder methods reveal the extreme sadism of Brazilian gender violence. Women are burned alive, dismembered, decapitated, beaten to death, and tortured before being executed. In many cases, aggressors document crimes through videos that circulate on social media as trophies or warnings for other women. Impunity is almost absolute. Only 35% of feminicide cases result in conviction, and even when criminals are arrested, they frequently receive light sentences or escape through delaying appeals that can last decades. Number 3. Institutional racism, genocide of black youth. Brazil, which prides itself on being a racial democracy, operates the largest racist genocide system in the Americas. Young black people are systematically hunted, arrested, and executed by a system that officially denies the existence of racism, but in practice functions as an ethnic extermination machine. Brazilian police kill a black person every 23 minutes. In 2023, more than 6,400 people were killed by police, with 87% being black. To put this in perspective, Brazilian police kill more people in 1 month than American police kill in an entire year, despite the United States having 100 million more inhabitants. The justice system perpetuates inequalities through racially biased sentences. Black people receive sentences 18.5% longer than whites for the same crime. A black man convicted of robbery receives an average of 4 years in prison, while a white person for the same crime receives 2.8 years. For drug-related crimes, the disparity is even greater. Black people are systematically convicted as traffickers, whites as users. Brazilian necropolitics, the power to decide who lives and who dies, operates through police operations that function as summary executions in poor communities. The Jacarezinho massacre exemplifies this pattern. 28 dead, all black, in an operation that lasted 6 hours in a Rio de Janeiro favela. Officially, they were confrontations with criminals, but independent investigations revealed point-blank executions and evidence planting. The job market keeps black Brazilians in subordinate positions through systematic discrimination. Resumes with typically black names receive 30% fewer interview calls than identical resumes with white names. Black executives represent only 6% of leadership positions in large companies, while 75% of domestic workers are black women. Number 4. The parallel state of crime, PCC and Red Command. Brazil is governed not only by Brasilia, but by 2 criminal organizations that control territories larger than European countries, maintain armies better equipped than many national armed forces, and operate parallel judicial systems that rival the official state. The First Capital Command, PCC, controls more than 90% of Sao Paulo prisons and has expanded operations to practically the entire national territory in neighboring countries. With estimated annual revenue of 35 billion reais, the PCC has a budget superior to 15 Brazilian states combined. The organization maintains internal tribunals, rigid codes of conduct, and justice systems that are enforced more efficiently than official laws. The Red Command dominates drug trafficking in Rio de Janeiro and controls favelas where more than 1 million people live under their laws. The organization offers services that the state failed to provide: security against theft, family conflict mediation, credit for small businesses, and even dignified burials for residents who cannot afford funerals. The war between factions has transformed entire cities into battlegrounds. In Fortaleza, confrontations between state guardians, GD, First Capital Command, and Red Command resulted in more than 5,000 deaths in 5 years. Buses are burned as messages, schools close during confrontations, and children grow up accustomed to the sound of gunfire's childhood soundtrack. Child recruitment by factions reaches industrial levels. 10-year-old children are hired as lookouts, receiving salaries superior to what their families earn in formal jobs. At 14, they're promoted to soldiers, receiving automatic weapons and territory to defend. The life expectancy of a traffic soldier is 2.1 years, but thousands of children choose this life because it's the only real economic opportunity available in their communities. Number 5. Militias, paramilitaries in power. Rio de Janeiro created a monster, even more dangerous than traditional trafficking. Militias, formed by police, firefighters, military, and politicians. These paramilitary organizations control 57% of the city's territory, imposing a violent dictatorship over more than 2 million Rio residents who live under their yoke. Rio militias are uniformed organized crime, commanded by state agents who should protect citizens. They charge protection fees for merchants, control distribution of cooking gas, internet, cable TV, and alternative transportation. Those who refuse to pay are tortured, have properties burned, or are murdered as examples. The Marielle Franco case exposed connections between militias and politics. The councilwoman was executed with rifle shots for investigating militia activities and denouncing the participation of elected politicians in paramilitary schemes. 5 years later, the crime's masterminds remain unpunished, protected by a network that includes federal deputies, police chiefs, and high-ranking military officials. Militia real estate business moves billions of reais annually. Paramilitary groups invade public lands, build irregular condominiums, and sell lots to families desperate for housing. When buyers discover properties are illegal, they're already trapped in debt schemes that transform them into slaves of the organizations. Would you live in a country where the police itself is one of the main threats to your life? Leave in the comments what you think of this brutal reality. Systematic torture practiced by militias includes methods that would make historical dictators recoil in horror. Crime tribunals judge residents for infractions like not paying fees, criticizing leaders, or trying to move from controlled areas. Punishments include public beatings, burns with hot iron, collective rapes, and executions broadcast live to terrorize communities. Number 6. Police violence, the state that kills its citizens. Brazilian police are the most lethal in the world outside declared war zones. In 2023, more than 6,400 people were executed by police, transforming security forces into one of the greatest threats to the lives of the very citizens they should protect. Police operations in favelas function as summary executions authorized by the state. Police enter poor communities, shooting indiscriminately, kill unarmed residents, and then plant weapons and drugs to justify murders. The Costa Barros massacre exemplifies this pattern. 5 young people were executed by 111 rifle shots while returning from a family barbecue. Police torture is the standard investigation method. The parrot's perch, electric shocks, simulated drowning, beatings, and burns are routines in Brazilian police stations. The Rafael Braga case, a recycling collector tortured for carrying disinfectant, symbolizes how poor people are transformed into state enemies and subjected to systematic institutional violence. Periphery genocide operates through security operations that specifically target black and poor populations. Police kill 4 times more in peripheries than in rich neighborhoods. In favelas, police operations result in deaths. In wealthy neighborhoods, they result in arrests and judicial processes. Racial and social difference determines whether someone will be arrested or executed. The resistance followed by death system allows police to execute citizens and then claim self-defense. Investigations revealed that police execute unarmed people and then fire at walls or into the air to simulate confrontations. Families receive bodies riddled with bullets with reports that classify executions as resistance to arrest. Number 7. Prison system. Hell on earth. Brazil operates the world's third largest prison system, where 750,000 people live in conditions that violate all international human rights conventions. Brazilian prisons are concentration camps where torture, rape, and murder are daily routines accepted as punishment for those who commit crimes. The capacity deficit maintains 350,000 more people than the system's official capacity. Cells designed for 8 people house 40. Prisoners sleep standing up, relieve themselves in PET bottles, and develop respiratory, dermatological, and mental diseases due to extreme overcrowding. Inhumane conditions include lack of drinking water, spoiled food infested with worms, absence of basic medical assistance, and physical structures in collapse. Prisoners die from tuberculosis, HIV, hepatitis, and completely preventable diseases because they don't receive medical treatment. In many prisons, family members are forced to bring basic medicines like aspirin and antibiotics. The 1992 Daily Massacre, where 111 prisoners were executed by military police in a single operation, symbolizes the brutality of the Brazilian prison system. Police invaded pavilions and executed inmates with point-blank shots, many already surrendered and disarmed. 30 years later, most police involved were never punished. Simultaneous rebellions, organized by the PCC, show the power of factions within the system. In 2006, more than 70 prison units rebelled simultaneously, demonstrating coordination capacity that surpasses the state itself. During rebellions, prisoners took hundreds of hostages and negotiated directly with government authorities. Number 8. Modern slave labor, 4 centuries after abolition. More than 130 years after slavery's official abolition, Brazil maintains approximately 200,000 people in slave labor conditions, perpetuating a system that mixes colonial control methods with modern human exploitation technologies. On cattle farms in Para and Mato Grosso, workers are lured with promises of dignified employment, then kept in captivity through impossible-to-pay debts and geographic isolation. Workers labor from sunrise to sunset without remuneration, live in shacks without sanitary conditions, and are prevented from leaving properties by armed overseers. The slave labor dirty list includes more than 600 companies and individuals caught exploiting workers. But the punishment system is so mild that many employers consider fines as operational costs of maintaining slaves. Multinational slaughterhouses, soy producers, and construction companies regularly appear on the list, then hire lobbyists to clean their reputations. Subscribe to the channel and discover more bizarre realities and shocking truths that Brazil hides from the world, because these truths need to be exposed. In illegal Amazon charcoal plants, entire families are enslaved to produce charcoal used by steel companies that supply steel to international automotive manufacturers. Children work alongside adults, exposed to toxic smoke that causes irreversible respiratory problems. When inspections approach, slaves are hidden in the forest or killed to eliminate evidence. Civil construction exploits thousands of workers through contractors that subcontract services to shell companies. Workers live on construction sites without sanitary conditions, work without safety equipment, and have documents confiscated to prevent them from leaving jobs. When they get injured or sick, they're simply abandoned without medical assistance. Number 9. Amazon destruction, ecological genocide. Brazil commits the largest ecocide in modern history through systematic destruction of the Amazon. Every minute, an area equivalent to 3 football fields of forest is deforested, exterminating unique ecosystems, eliminating indigenous peoples, and compromising global climate balance. Illegal deforestation is controlled by mafias that operate with protection from local and federal politicians. Loggers invade indigenous lands, extract century-old trees, and leave trails of destruction that can be seen from space. More than 11,000 square kilometers of forest were destroyed in 2023 alone, an area larger than countries like Lebanon or Montenegro. Miners poison Amazon rivers with mercury, used to separate gold, contaminating fish that are the dietary base of indigenous peoples. Yanomami children are born with neurological deformities caused by heavy metal intoxication. Adults develop cancer, kidney and liver problems that kill them slowly while illegal miners profit millions from gold extracted from indigenous lands. Land grabbing steals public territories through false documents and armed violence. Land grabbers invade conservation areas, expel traditional populations, deforest forests, and then sell lands to cattle ranchers and soy producers. Millions of hectares of public patrimony were illegally privatized through schemes involving corrupt notaries, local politicians, and agribusiness entrepreneurs. Illegal cattle ranching transforms forests into pastures for cattle that supply multinational slaughterhouses. More than 80% of Amazon deforestation is caused by cattle ranching expansion. Ranchers burn millions of hectares annually, eliminating biodiversity accumulated over millions of years to create grass that feeds cattle destined for export. Number 10. Social apartheid. 2 Brazils in 1 country. Brazil is one of the world's most unequal countries, where 1% of the population concentrates 28% of national wealth, while 50 million Brazilians live in extreme poverty, creating 2 parallel realities that coexist in the same territory without ever touching. Rich neighborhoods like Morumbi in Sao Paulo or Barra de Tijuca in Rio de Janeiro function as fortified enclaves where multimillionaires live in condominiums with private security, helipads, and access to international services. A few kilometers away, favelas like Capão Redondo or Cidade de Deus house millions of people without access to basic sanitation, quality education, or adequate medical assistance. Social mobility is practically non-existent. Children born in peripheries have less than 0.5% chance of entering quality public universities. The educational system offers precarious teaching in public schools attended by the poor, while rich children study in private schools that cost more than entire families' annual salaries. Domestic workers earn salaries below 600 reais monthly to work in mansions where employers spend this amount on a single meal. The domestic workers' law, which theoretically guaranteed labor rights for maids, is systematically circumvented through informal contracts and dismissal threats for those who demand compliance with legislation. The life expectancy difference between rich and poor reaches 20 years. Residents of wealthy neighborhoods live on average until 80 years old, while periphery residents die at 60. This difference isn't genetic. It's the result of unequal access to food, health, education, and security. Number 11. Systemic corruption. The machine to steal the country. Corruption in Brazil isn't an aberration. It's the operating system that keeps the country functioning to benefit a political and business elite that treats public resources as private property. It's estimated that between 10% and 15% of Brazilian GDP is diverted annually through corruption schemes. Operation Car Wash revealed corruption schemes that involve presidents, ministers, governors, parliamentarians, and businessmen in a bribery system that functioned for decades. More than 400 billion reais were diverted through overpriced contracts, phantom construction companies, and bank accounts in tax havens. The Mensaleo showed how parliamentary votes were bought monthly through systematic payments to deputies and senators. The scheme functioned for years, with businessmen financing the purchase of political support to approve laws that benefited their businesses to the detriment of public interest. Millionaire politicians are elected with salaries of 30,000 reais monthly, but develop fortunes of millions in a few years. Political families like the Sarneys, Cullers, Renan Calheiros, and others maintain fortunes through generations that occupy public positions, creating dynasties based on public treasury plunder. Impunity ensures that corrupt individuals are rarely punished. Privileged jurisdiction protects politicians from criminal processes through processing in superior courts that take decades to judge cases. When convictions finally happen, criminals have already died of old age or served sentences in special prisons with hotel amenities. Number 12. Collapsed public health, SUS and the ICU. The Unified Health System, SUS, theoretically one of the world's largest public health systems, has collapsed in practice, leaving 200 million Brazilians without access to basic treatments and transforming easily curable diseases into death sentences for those who cannot afford private medicine. Public hospitals operate as horror movie scenarios, corridors flooded with blood and urine, equipment broken for years, lack of basic medicines like dipyrone and saline solution, improvised stretchers with bloody mattresses, and overloaded doctors who see 200 patients per shift. The lack of doctors in the poorest regions forces patients to travel hundreds of kilometers for basic consultations. Entire cities go months without a doctor, children die from preventable diseases, and women give birth alone because there are no professionals to deliver babies. Waiting lists for elective surgeries last years. Cancer patients die waiting for chemotherapy. People with heart problems die waiting for surgeries. And diabetics have limbs amputated due to lack of adequate treatment. The system functions as natural selection. Those who can afford private medicine survive. During the COVID-19 pandemic, SUS collapsed completely. Hospitals filled beyond capacity. Patients died from lack of oxygen. Doctors were forced to choose who would live and who would die due to ICU bed scarcity. More than 700,000 Brazilians died, many from government negligence and health system collapse. Number 13. Education in ruins. Manufacturing ignorance. The Brazilian educational system systematically produces ignorance, keeping millions of young people without basic qualifications to compete in the job market and perpetuating poverty cycles through deliberately precarious public education. Public schools function as human warehouses where children are stored for 12 years without learning essential skills. Classrooms have 50 students. Teachers earn starvation wages. There are no textbooks, computers, or laboratories. Many schools don't have functioning bathrooms, libraries, or sports courts. Functional illiteracy affects 70% of Brazilians who theoretically completed high school. Millions of young people receive diplomas without being able to interpret simple texts, perform basic mathematical operations, or understand elementary scientific concepts. The diploma becomes worthless paper that doesn't guarantee employability. Teachers abandon the profession en masse due to degrading salaries, school violence, and lack of working conditions. States delay salaries for months, forcing educators to work as Uber drivers or salespeople to survive. Many develop depression, anxiety, and other mental illnesses due to stress from trying to teach in impossible conditions. Public universities, theoretically free, are attended mostly by upper-middle-class students who could afford expensive prep courses and private preparatory schools. Poor young people, products of precarious public education, cannot be approved in competitive entrance exams, perpetuating social exclusion through higher education. Number 14. Climate catastrophe. The country that burns the future. Brazil became one of the biggest global climate villains through environmental policies that prioritize short-term profits over long-term human species survival. The country burns forests, pollutes rivers, and destroys ecosystems on an industrial scale. Global warming transformed Brazil into a furnace. Temperatures in Rio de Janeiro exceed 60 degrees Celsius considering heat index. Heat waves kill hundreds of people annually, and historic drought in the Northeast forces millions to migrate to other regions. The country that should lead the fight against climate change became part of the problem. Predatory agriculture poisons soil, water, and air through uncontrolled use of pesticides. Brazil consumes 20% of world pesticides, many prohibited in Europe and the United States for causing cancer. Farmers dump poisons on plantations by planes, contaminating entire cities and causing cancer epidemics in agricultural regions. Fires destroy millions of hectares annually, eliminating biodiversity and releasing billions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. Amazon cities are covered by toxic smoke for months. Hospitals fill with respiratory problem cases, and children develop chronic asthma from breathing contaminated air. Water resources are being systematically destroyed. Brazilian rivers became toxic sewers where nothing survives. The Tite River in Sao Paulo has been clinically dead for decades. The São Francisco River of National Integration agonizes due to industrial pollution and excessive capture for irrigation. Number 15. The machine for manufacturing despair. Brazil managed to create a social system so efficient at producing suffering and despair that millions of Brazilians completely lost faith in the possibility of change, creating a mentally exhausted population that accepts barbarities as normality. The Brazilian population's mental health collapsed. The country has one of the world's highest rates of anxiety and depression, with more than 12 million people suffering from mental disorders without access to adequate treatment. Suicides increased 35% in the last decade, especially among young people who see no future in their lives. Brain drain drains national talents to other countries. Doctors, engineers, scientists, and other qualified professionals emigrate en masse, leaving Brazil without human capital necessary for development. Public universities train professionals who are immediately exported to countries that offer opportunities and quality of life. Inequalities, psychological violence corrodes national self-esteem. Brazilians develop inferiority complexes, accept humiliations as normal, and internalize discourses that blame victims for structural problems. The expression "Brazil is not for amateurs" summarizes collective resignation in the face of absurdities that should cause revolt. Young people grow up without real prospects of social mobility, quality education, or basic security. Many take refuge in drugs, video games, or escapist fantasies because reality is unbearable. Others adhere to extremist movements that offer simple explanations for complex problems. Learned helplessness became a national characteristic. Brazilians learned that protesting is useless, voting changes nothing, working honestly doesn't guarantee dignity, and following rules is a competitive disadvantage. This resignation allows elites to perpetuate exploitation systems without significant resistance. Final reflection: the price of collective indifference. After traversing the darkest corners of Brazilian reality, a question haunts. How did a country with abundant natural resources, creative population, and gigantic potential manage to transform itself into a machine for producing human suffering on an industrial scale? The answer perhaps lies in the very nature of the system that developed over centuries. Brazil is not a country that failed to develop. It's a country that functions exactly as it was designed to function, extracting wealth to benefit a few while keeping millions in subsistence conditions that guarantee cheap labor and votes bought through minimal assistance programs. Violence is not a defect of the Brazilian system. It's an essential characteristic that maintains social order based on extreme inequality. Corruption is not an aberration. It's an operational method that ensures the functioning of an economy based on privileges and personal connections. Environmental destruction is not an accident. It's the logical consequence of a predatory model that prioritizes immediate profits over sustainability. What may be most disturbing is realizing that much of this suffering is accepted as normal by the Brazilian population itself. Generations grew up believing that police violence is necessary, that corruption is inevitable, that inequality is natural, and that protesting is a waste of time. What should cause revolt became resignation, and what should be unacceptable became everyday. Brazil forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about human nature. It's possible to create social systems where the majority of the population accepts living in subhuman conditions, while a small elite lives like royalty. It's possible to normalize levels of violence that would make civilized societies convulse. It's possible to make victims defend systems that oppress them. Even more shocking is realizing our own international complicity with these systems. Every time we buy Brazilian products without questioning work conditions, every time we visit the country as tourists ignoring brutal realities a few meters from resorts, every time we treat Brazilian systemic problems as exotic folklore, we become part of the machine that perpetuates suffering. Brazil is not just a distant country with unique problems. It's a laboratory that shows what happens when economic development doesn't come accompanied by social justice, when growth benefits only elites, when institutions serve private interests instead of the common good. It's a mirror that reflects dark potentialities present in any society that chooses to ignore injustices while they don't directly affect those with privileges. The question that remains is not only about Brazil, but about humanity. Is it possible to build truly just societies, or are we condemned to repeat oppression cycles where few prosper through the suffering of many? Brazil suggests that without constant vigilance and permanent struggle for justice, any society can transform into a machine for producing inequality and violence. Perhaps the most important lesson is that indifference has a price. When we allow injustices to accumulate, when we ignore others' suffering, When we accept simplistic explanations for complex problems, we create conditions for entire societies to transform into systems of exploitation and violence. Today's Brazil is the result of centuries of collective choices. Each generation that chose to ignore structural problems, each voter who sold their vote, each citizen who accepted corruption as normal, each person who preferred individual privileges to collective justice contributed to creating the country that exists today. And you, after knowing this brutal reality that hides behind the smile and Brazilian music, can you still look at the country the same way? Can you still watch Carnival without thinking about children being recruited by trafficking in Rio favelas? Can you still cheer for the Brazilian national team without remembering young black people being executed by police? Perhaps these are the most important questions we can ask, not about Brazil, but about ourselves and about what kind of world we're willing to accept through our indifference. And now tell me, after knowing the horrors that hide behind Brazil's cheerful image, what shocked you most? Did you already imagine reality could be so violent and unequal? How do you think we can stop being silent accomplices to these tragedies? Leave in the comments your reflections on how our search for entertainment can become complicity with systems that destroy human lives. And if this content made you question your own perceptions about the tropical country we so admire, share it with other people who need to know this reality. If you want to continue discovering the uncomfortable truths that countries hide behind colorful facades, activate the notification bell to not miss any investigation that reveals what really happens behind the scenes of our world. Thank you very much for having the courage to face these brutal realities. And until the next journey through humanity's darkest and most revealing aspects.